All right, a good vach. One of the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov, in the earlier years, before the Baal Shem Tov was even so well known, his name was Rabbi Nissen. And one time when he was about to leave the Baal Shem Tov back to his home in Harki, the Baal Shem Tov called him in, and Rabbi Nissen already realized that he has a special shlichus for him, just from the way the Baal Shem Tov, was getting ready to speak to him. And the Baal Shem Tov started saying a pasuk, Yerdei hayam ba'aniyos eisem alach b'mayim rabim, which means that those who go down to the sea in aniyos. Now aniyos regularly means ships, and we'll see there's also a second pirish to that. Eisem alach b'mayim rabim, those who do work in the Mayim Rabim, in the strong waters. So the Baal Shem Tov said that there's two ways to explain the word aniyah. Aniyah can mean either a ship, but it could also mean like aniyah, like mispad, like mourning. In other words, not desirable situation. And so he said that Yerdei Hayam, those who go down to sea, is talking about the neshama when it comes down into this world. And there's two ways that the neshama can come down to this world. Either they can come down when a person comes to a family and has a chinuch that is proper. So he goes down in a ship. He has a proper enclosing, a proper way to navigate the waters. What's the proper way in a ship? And that's when you have a proper chinuch and you're brought up in the ways of Torah and mitzvahs. But then there are those who come down to this world and unfortunately they come down in an unfortunate way, and they have no connection to the Yiddishkeit, and they're in a very low level. Not because of their fault, but that's what happens. And then he turned to this Rabbi Nissen and he said, then there are the Oisei Malachim Mayim Rabim. There are those souls that their job is to do work in these waters, that they're strong enough to navigate these terribly, wavy and turbulent waters, and they can go and they can do work, which means what? That they can bring these souls who are in these unfortunate situations and bring them back. And the Baal Shem Tov then takes an envelope, a closed envelope, he gives it to Rabbi Nissen. And he says, you are going to go to your home in Harki, and the winter is about to start, and Benedict Radzivil, who, I hope I'm saying that name right, the prince, he comes every year into his lodge or his place in Harki. He would go to hunt over there, and he's for sure going to bring his friend Pierre Louis. That was this guy's name, his friend. And what he told Rabbi Nissen to do is on the second day, when from the coming of the prince and his friend Pierre to Harki, you should open this letter, open the envelope. And Rabbi Nissen already understood that the Baal Shem Tov was, it wasn't such a big deal. It was like, okay, Baal Shem Tov gave me a shlichus to do. He had done many missions before, so he said, okay. Now, who was Benedict Radzivil? He was a prince, a very honorable prince, and he was actually very good to the Yidden. When he was young, he studied in France, and that's where he met Pierre Louis, or Pierre Louis. I'm not going to say it that way again. They got very, very close, and so much so that he brought Pierre with him. And so now the prince couldn't have known. He didn't know that really Pierre Louis was a Yid, and he couldn't have, because even Pierre himself didn't know he was Jewish. What happened? Pierre was born to a Jewish father and mother. And his mother wanted to give him a proper education, but his father, for whatever reason, I guess, was very opposed to Yiddishkeit and didn't want his son to even have any inkling that he's Jewish. And so he made sure that he was, totally secularized into the French society. And he had there was no sign of him being Jewish. And so he grew up that way without having any knowledge of his Yiddishkeit. Now, because he was such a talented and charming and friendly person, so he was very successful. And so much so that even the prince took one of his relatives, he set him up with one of his relatives, and he got married to one of the nobility. Anyway, so every single year they would go to the thick forests around Harki, and they would go and hunt. And they would party a lot, and when Pierre turned 55, his wife passed away. So he was even more free. He felt this, all of a sudden he could go, he wasn't attached to anybody, and he, partied even more and was even more wild. Now, Reb Nissen came to Harki during Kislev, and in the whole town you could already tell they were getting ready for the prince to come, because when the prince came, all the noblemen came, and that's when all the stores would, peddle their best wares, because so it was like today when you have the World Cup, so it's the best time for the country because tourism skyrockets. Anyway, so now the hunt started, in the day they arrived in the morning, and everyone was talking about it. But towards the evening, there was a very different talk. Why? Because the hunting was amazing, but on the way, when they already had come back, the prince, as he was walking into his house, he tripped on the doorstep, and he fell, and his gun went off, and a bullet went into his torso around his chest area, and the doctor on site, always with the prince, couldn't stop the blood. Now, they looked for doctors everywhere, and everybody tried to help him. Now, the Yidden also were davening for him because of how he was their benefactor, but nothing got better, and everyone who was able to help, just threw up their hands in defeat. They didn't know what to do. Now, the next morning, which was the second day from their coming, Reb Nissen quickly opens up this envelope, and he sees that in the envelope is instructions for the proper medicine to give to the prince, and how to make it, and all the instructions of how to administer it, everything. And so right away he goes about preparing it, and
Who opened the letter again?
Reb Nissen was sent by the Baal Shem Tov.
He was the one who was injured. But who's the one who was injured?
No, the prince.
Well, the prince was injured.
I said Reb Nissen was injured? I'm sorry.
I don't know. Maybe I think I might have.
Okay, so the prince was injured, and Reb Nissen, who was the follower of the Baal Shem Tov, he opened up the envelope, and it says this remedy. And once he was done, he quickly ran to the palace, and everyone was like, "What is this guy doing here? This chassid in a long coat? What's he doing over there?" But Pierre Louis stops him, and when he tells Pierre what's going on, what he wants to do, he thought it was a joke, and he said, "Get out of here! What are you doing? What are you wasting my time for? I'm about to lose my best friend, and you're messing around over here." But one of the doctors heard the commotion, and he asked Pierre what's going on, and he said, "Listen, let me hear what the Jew has to say." So the Jew tells him, Reb Nissen tells him, and the doctor is listening, and Reb Nissen is trying his best to persuade him to just, please, you have nothing to lose. And the doctor turns around to Pierre and he says, "Listen, we actually have nothing to lose over here. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But he can't make it worse." So Reb Nissen did exactly what the Baal Shem Tov said, and he took the remedy, took this liquid, and he dropped in the mouth of the prince, the remedy, and he followed in the next hour. He followed exactly what it says on the paper, and he kept on taking it out, looking back, looking at it, putting it back, and going exactly what the Baal Shem Tov says. From an hour after Reb Nissen had started giving the cure, already you were able to see that the prince was coming back. His fever went down, and his face wasn't as contorted. It was already more relaxed. And he just kept on getting better. And at that point, everyone around Reb Nissen, went from being suspicious of Reb Nissen to being to pure admiration. So they looked at him and he said, "How do you know how to do this?" But Reb Nissen decided not to say anything yet, up until the point where the prince opened his eyes, and then Reb Nissen said, "The instructions for this remedy I got from my master, the great tzaddik, the Baal Shem Tov." Anyway, so now there was a second part of the shlichus of the mission that was given to Reb Nissen. What was that?
I'm going to guess it has something to do with Pierre Louis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Wait.
so the second part of the shlichus was given to him not on a piece of paper; it was given to him bal peh. And he called Pierre to the side, and Pierre was like walking around drunk from happiness. His friend just went from the doorstep of death to back to, fully healthy. So he says, "I have something to tell you from my Rebbe." So Pierre brings him into a room, and Nissen puts his hands on Pierre's shoulders, and he says, "I'm here to tell you that
you're a Jew.
That you're a Yid." Sorry, thank you. I'm here to tell you you're a Yid, and your real name is Pesach Tzvi, after your mother's father. Sorry, after your mother's grandfather. And Pierre was shocked. And Reb Nissen said, "The Baal Shem Tov asked me to tell you this, and that you've been going on a not good path, and you should change it right away and return to your God." And Reb Nissen just left him over there shocked. And the next day, the entire town heard about this amazing story, how Reb Nissen, through the directive of the Baal Shem Tov, was able to heal the prince. And until then, people didn't even know that much about the Baal Shem Tov, and they knew even less of the fact that Reb Nissen was one of the Chassidim of the Baal Shem Tov. But from then, the town of Harki and everywhere around knew the greatness of the Baal Shem Tov was publicized over there. Now the prince kept on getting better and better. His strength was coming back to him. And Erev Shabbos, he calls Reb Nissen, and he says, "How can I, repay you?" So he said, "First of all, don't thank me, thank the Baal Shem Tov. I was just his messenger. And about what you want to give me, I don't want anything. I just ask you that you continue to be good to the Yidden just as if you have been until now." Fine. So now after a few days, the prince left, and he went back to Moscow. Less than a week later, there was a knock on Reb Nissen's door. He opens the door, and Pierre Louis is there. He says, "Don't call me Pierre anymore, call me Pesach Tzvi."
Oh.
Yeah, and he was Pashut, his eyes were tearing up from emotion. And Pesach Tzvi was invited inside. And he explained to Reb Nissen what happened since he gave him that message. He said, "You should know that from that moment, I couldn't rest. Everything that I was used to in my life all of a sudden became like, it was strange, and I didn't want it anymore. And on the other hand, I was, I had this strong yearning all of a sudden to Judaism and to Jews. And I was trying to remember anything from my childhood, and bit by bit, there were a few things that I remembered, very, very little, that started to make sense to me, that explained, that Taka, I'm Jewish. And it was bothering me so much to the point where I felt I had to tell the prince himself what's going on. And after a long conversation with the prince said, you should Taka, listen to the Baal Shem Tov. And he said that basically I've decided to return to Yiddishkeit with a full heart. And that's the end of the story. So we should witness miracles like that in our own lives. And any area of Avodah that we have missing, we should be able to complete, just like Pierre Louis or Pesach Tzvi. Mitzvah, everybody.
I am an ancient wall of stone.
And thank you for joining. Je suis Pesach Tzvi. That's incredible.
Very spot on.